it was published almost 100 years after Webster died. Over 100 years after Webster died. So it wasn't really Webster's. But it was a new edition of an existing dictionary, so it wasn't really new. It was an absolutely American dictionary, so it's not international. And it was the seventh in a direct line from Webster's original 1828 dictionary, so it's not the third. So it turns out that the whole title of that book is false. Well, let's find out why. And we'll go back a little bit in time to see, there's, by the way, the dictionary in that film, the beautiful dictionary that we just saw, the one that's sitting right on stage behind me. This image is the artist's rendering of the sculpture of that dictionary, Webster's second, from 1934. And the sculpture, the life-size sculpture of it, is sitting above the front door at Merriam-Webster headquarters in Springfield, Massachusetts. So I always like that image. But we're going to go back in time because Webster himself didn't invent the dictionary. He used a model, and his model was this man, Samuel Johnson. Samuel Johnson in London in 1755. He wrote the great first modern dictionary, in a sense, of the English language. Not the first dictionary ever written. There were monolingual dictionaries of English going back to about 1600. But that's not really that far back. It's only about 400 years of history when you think about it. And so the original dictionaries of English were very thin little books, and they were just lists of hard words. The words that derive, guess what, from Greek, from Latin, and from French. But the words that are basic words, household words, words like door and cow and cat, they weren't in those original dictionaries. It was Johnson who decided, among other things, that we would catalog all the words of the English language, including the simple, basic ones, not just the ones that come from classical languages, but the good old-fashioned Anglo-Saxon words, all the words with a single syllable. And that was one of his great innovations. And then his book looked like this. It was in 2 volumes. This is actually our copy at Merriam-Webster of the 1799 printing of Johnson's dictionary. And Johnson's dictionary in 2 volumes was called A Dictionary of the English Language, and it set the standard. And if you know your history, you know that in 1755, that's the middle of what is called the Enlightenment. And the Enlightenment was that period when science and education were privileged, and literacy became widespread, and people were organizing the world in a scientific way. And so a dictionary was a perfect way to express that scientific way of organizing knowledge. And by the way, the encyclopedia was invented just a few years later. The Encyclopedia Britannica was published in 1768. So these were movements of the Enlightenment. And then what we have in America after the Enlightenment is this man, Noah Webster, who here he looks like money, and was in fact, like other people on money, kind of a founding, well, not quite a founding father, he was a founding uncle. He knew Benjamin Franklin, he knew George Washington personally, he was friends with them, but he was an educator. And in fact, his first book was not a dictionary, it was a textbook for spelling. It was to teach children how to read and write. And so the whole tradition of spelling bees as a school activity, as a village activity, it began with the great spelling book of 1783 by Noah Webster. After the spelling book, he decided to write an American dictionary of the English language using a different kind of spelling, and we'll see what I mean by that. His first dictionary, 1806, it's a tiny little book. It's like the size of an airport novel. It's called, as a title, A Compendious Dictionary of the English Language. Compendious is a word that you all know, I know, but most people don't. And it means something different from the way it looks. It means concise. It means short. And the definitions in this book are 3 or 4 words long. It's a very, very short dictionary. But it had some special things in it. It had, for example, this kind of definition. Cat is defined as a domestic animal, and dog is defined as a domestic animal. So you see that lexicography has come a long way from the time of Noah Webster. It's true, in old dictionaries you often see things that if you look up cow or cat or something, it will say an animal that is well known. And so there's no definition at all. It's just saying, well, you should know this, you fool. Why did you look it up? But he also added new words. He added words that had never been in an English dictionary before. Words like skunk and chowder, which were from Native American languages. Words like selectman, which if you're from New England, you know is still a political term in New England. Webster was from Connecticut. A word like whiskey, which was a new word when Johnson made his dictionary in England in the 1750s, and so it was too new for Johnson to include. it was included in Webster's dictionary. And that I think is very important for the American dictionary to be the first one to ever use the word immigrant in a dictionary. It was Webster's dictionary of 1806, and psychology also. Now, the real reason Webster is remembered for you is the spelling. Of course, he changed the spelling. He had two great goals. He wanted to make an idiomatic, patriotic American variety of English, and he wanted to simplify English spelling. He succeeded in creating an American variety of English. He completely failed in making English more logical. And you know that better than anyone. In fact, not only on the face of it is it not logical to, for example, have one L rather than two, or to have no silent K at the end of a word. He hated silent letters. He hated the E's at the ends of words. He hated double consonants. But the fact is, we're all now responsible for two varieties of English, aren't we? Because you can all read and understand British English spelling perfectly well, but you have to be responsible for both. And you'll see on the right here, those are the what we recognize now as the American spellings of these words that have moved from Johnson's day. Then Webster did the big thing. He attacked Johnson directly. He made a big two-volume dictionary just like Johnson. It was actually bigger than Johnson's. It was the biggest English dictionary ever made, had about 70,000 words in 1828. And Johnson's title was A Dictionary of the English Language, and Webster's title was An American Dictionary of the English Language. So it was very deliberately an attack on Johnson, basically saying, we have our own country, we have our own language now. And we'll take a quick look at what he did. Here's the title page, and you'll see it says An American Dictionary of the English Language at the top. And then this is a page of the manuscript, so that we still have. This is him writing the definitions, and I know you can't read it, and I can't read it either, but it's interesting to see how he was working in pen and ink. The thing is, Webster was a great editor and a great lexicographer. He wasn't a great salesman. That dictionary cost $20 in 1828. $20 in 1828 would buy you a grandfather clock. So it was not a household item the way we know dictionaries today. It was a luxury item. Only the very wealthy could afford it. But that was also kind of a bad strategy for sales, because he couldn't sell very many. What happened was the printers of the dictionary, their names are Charles and George Merriam. They were printing school books and Bibles in Springfield, Massachusetts. And when Webster died in 1843, he left some of those dictionaries unsold. He wasn't able to sell them all. And the Merriams, who, because they knew they could sell school books, they knew they could sell Bibles, they thought, we could probably sell dictionaries also. So they decided to take over the rights of Webster from Webster's family to sell what remained of Webster's dictionary and see what would happen. And what they did is they engaged Webster's son-in-law. His name was Chauncey Goodrich. He was a professor at Yale University. And he was a scholar, and so he could sort of do a little bit of editing, a little bit of adding new words, but really not change the dictionary very much. And what they created was, in 1847, the first Merriam edition of Webster's dictionary, and you can see at the top, $6. So it was $20 in 1828, and then now it's $6 in 1847. And the gamble paid off. The Merriams sold lots of dictionaries. And they realized this is a very important business. In fact, they gave up all the other parts of their business. They no longer sold school books, they no longer sold law books, they no longer sold Bibles. In fact, they even gave up the printing business itself. They became publishers, not just printers, but publishers of Webster's dictionary. And what they did, among other things, to make the dictionary $6, they took those two volumes and they turned them into one. You all recognize Webster's Unabridged Dictionary as a single volume book. And they invented that. And you can see at the top here, that is the large print from Webster's 1828, and below, that is the very tiny print of Webster's 1847 in a single volume. So what they did was they crammed all the two volumes into one volume to make that $6 book. And this is the kind of publishing trick that we all know today. And then they did something that no one had ever done before. Webster never used the word unabridged. He did use the word abridged. He made a little small dictionary. He called it Abridged from Webster's American Dictionary, but he never used the word unabridged. And the thing is, the title of the dictionary was still An American Dictionary. They didn't change the title, but they put that word on the spine, unabridged. And I think they did it because people were used to seeing a two-volume dictionary, and they wanted to make sure that people understood that the whole dictionary is here between two covers. It's just one book now. But this unofficial name of unabridged over time would become more official, and it's the way that we refer to the dictionary today. We'll talk more about it in a bit. Then something else happened, which was competition. Webster wasn't the only dictionary in the 19th century in America. In fact, there were several, but the best of the other ones was this man's dictionary. His name is Joseph Worcester. And a lot of people thought his dictionary was better than Webster's. Now, we're getting to around the 1850s. We're about 10 or 15 years after Webster's death, and Webster's dictionary was really from 1828, so it's getting old. It's starting to look old. There are flaws in the dictionary, and some people are happy to point out those flaws and say, you know, I like Worcester's dictionary better. And those people included, of course, Worcester's publishers, and it was suddenly a war of the dictionaries. One of the things that Worcester did was he announced his next edition. He said, in 1860, I'm going to bring out an edition of my dictionary with engravings, with illustrations. No dictionary had ever had those engravings or illustrations in them up to that point. But the Merriams were canny, and they were smart. They saw the advertisement, and they said, we have to beat him to be the first dictionary that has illustrations. And so what they did was, they got the engravings, and they put them, as you see here, all on the same pages at the front of the book. Not alphabetized, for example, C with cat in the C's, for example, or lemur in the L's, because they didn't have time to reset the lead type of the entire dictionary to accommodate the images. So they simply made a new edition of their dictionary with the images in the front, and they beat Worcester by 6 months. So they were able to say, we got the first illustrated dictionary published in America. It was kind of a trick, but they did it. Then what happened was, we have the War of the Dictionaries. If you look carefully in the middle of this, you see that there are two books that are boxing. There are two books that are fighting each other. And they say across the side, one of them on the left says Webster, and the one on the right says Worcester. This was a cartoon from Harper's Magazine in 1860, and it shows that this was a war of the dictionaries that was a public war. It was a cultural war. There were some universities that adopted Webster, some universities that preferred Worcester. They went back and forth. But ultimately, what was decided was that Worcester's innovations, Worcester's newness was important enough that the Merriams had to imitate their newness. They had to update the dictionary. They had to do something that no one else had ever done. Always, dictionaries up until that point had been written by a single man. There was always a man in those days. And then, when that man died, the dictionary essentially died with him. There was never really a second edition or a publisher of Johnson's dictionary, for example, that continued publishing it. There were new revisions, but they didn't have the same impact as the original. And so the Merriams did something for the first time, something that no one had ever done before. They engaged this man, another professor at Yale, Noah Porter, to take the book apart, character by character, to take it completely apart and remake a brand new dictionary. And this dictionary would become the first great modern dictionary. Now what they said, what Noah Porter writes in the preface, he said, we are going to change the definitions, but not too much. While they have been thus bold, the editors have been bold on the one hand, they have been careful on the other to retain the exact language of the earlier edition. And that's an important point, because we're going to see what they did to change those definitions. This is a page of the manuscript of the 1864 edition. So on the left, those gray blocks, those are the etymologies that replaced Webster's etymologies. Webster's etymologies were almost all incorrect. And then what you see in the middle is the existing edition, the 1859, and you see how many lines are crossed out. And that means those definitions had to be completely rewritten. And so you can see how much work goes into a revision. And this is just a close-up of the same page, so you can see the handwriting and see how much is retained. The one word that I see there that was not changed is the word considerably. So Webster did a good job with that. Now, here's the problem with the etymologies. Webster used these characters. You see, he uses Hebrew characters, he uses Cyrillic characters, the Arabic characters there, and then he uses what he calls Chaldee. You see it says CH with like Hebraic characters after it. And Chaldee was what he called the Aramaic language. And so these are biblical languages. These have nothing to do with English. We all know that English is an Anglo-Saxon language. It's a Germanic language that in the Indo-European map of languages came from the Germanic family. We know that English is interesting because it is a Germanic language. It has a Germanic syntax, but it has a Latin vocabulary, doesn't it? You all know that because there's so many words from Latin and therefore from Greek that came into English later. But the basic structure of our language is Germanic. And so what does this mean? What does it mean? Why was he talking about Hebrew and Chaldean, Assyrian, and Arabic? Well, if you see where it says class DB, those are the consonants. He arranged the etymologies of words according to their sounds, which is a little bit crazy to us today. And then he said class number 53 and 54, the DB is from the TB of established. You hear the TB in established or the DB in his classification. And so at the bottom of this entry, he said, as you can see, Webster wrote, "It is easy to see that the root of this word is allied to that of beak, peak, and pick. But you all know that the word speak is not related to beak. It rhymes with beak, but it's not related to beak." And so Webster was on the wrong path. He was on the wrong track here. And this is the updated version. This is the 1864 version. And you see that speak is related to sprechen, the German word. And this is the way it was updated by a German etymologist. The Germans were the best etymologists in the 19th century. You know, the brothers Grimm, who wrote the fairy tales, they were among the first of the great etymologists. But Webster decided these words, because they sounded similar, that they were in fact related etymologically, which they are not. Full and foul, damn and dumb, skill and scale, puff and buffet, forswear and answer. Even though actually the end of forswear and the end of answer is sort of swear. There is a little bit of a connection there. But these words were essentially unrelated. He was doing etymology by phonetics. And that was his theory. But his theory was wrong. So, the man who did the etymologies, who redid them, the German scholar Karl Augustus Friedrich Mann, he wrote this about Webster's etymologies. He said, "We can't use those fantastic unhistorical etymologies in a new edition of the dictionary." And so he also said, we shouldn't put those characters, those Hebrew characters, those Arabic characters, we shouldn't put them in an English dictionary because almost no one can read them. And all they do is, as he puts, it says, they give a useless display designed to impose upon the common people the impression of unusual learnedness. In other words, he said, it's showing off. We need to be more utilitarian. We need to be more useful. Why show off that you know these languages when they don't really connect to the roots of English? So, this now is a statement from James Murray, the great editor of the Oxford English Dictionary. And he said, Webster was a great man, a born definer of words, and the definitions are the best part of his dictionaries, we'll see. He was fired with the idea that America ought to have a dictionary of its own form of English, independent of British usage. But he said, unfortunately, like many other clever men, he had the notion that derivations can be elaborated from one's own consciousness as well as definitions. And he included in his work so-called etymologies of this sort. But etymology is simply word history, and word history, like all other history, is a record of the facts which did happen, not a fabric of conjectures as to what may have happened. So he's talking about his forebear, saying, I respect Webster, but he was wrong about this one thing. So let's now look at his definitions. Webster, like Johnson, basically just listed definitions. He didn't organize them or group them the way we might today. And so, for example, for the word dry, these are the 6 definitions he had. And in 1864, you can see that all of these senses that Webster put were really collected under one definition, and they used for the first time a subset, the ABC thing. This was an innovation. This was new in 1864. Also, here's Webster on the top, Webster 1828. You can see 4 out of his 6 definitions all could be collapsed into one single definition, number 3, for the word drum. So you can see what we're doing here in the modern sense. We are grouping definitions together to make them more logical, and also to make them more etymological. Because if we group all things that are shaped like a drum together, then we're using the etymology of the word to organize the definition. And here is Webster's definition of the word rectitude. And he would sometimes put these little sermons at the end of his definitions. As you see in the bottom here, it says, perfect rectitude belongs only to the Supreme Being. The more nearly the rectitude of men approaches the standard of the divine law, etc., etc. It's really not a definition anymore, is it? He's making some kind of a sermon. And they decided that that was not appropriate. So the words that are in red here are the entire definition from 1864. They kept his definition word for word, but they cut out the extra words that they thought didn't apply. These are some of the new words that were added in the 1864 dictionary, or their new meanings of existing words. And you can see, you can trace a little bit of American history here. Adobe and hacienda from expansion into the Southwest. Ballast and freight car and freight train from the innovation of the steam engine. And you see words like breech loader, revolver. Shoddy was the fabric, the blue, that made the Union uniforms. And so that you see words from science, words from agriculture, words from the different new professions that were added to the dictionary at that time. This is an advertisement, a great 19th century mess to look at. At the very top in the center, you can barely read it. It says, "Please let this be seen by others." And it was like a broadsheet that you would put up to advertise the dictionary. I love this advertisement because it says, you can barely see it, but it says on the left, "The family educator. It will answer thousands of questions to the wide-awake child." And, you know, my mentor, my boss, he says, you know, to move dictionary making from the Herculean but idiosyncratic effort of one individual to a disciplined and methodical effort of an organized group was really the actual result of the 1864 dictionary. So, I consider it to be the invention of the modern dictionary. What was new about it? First of all, it was the first one with Indo-European etymologies. It was the first one with the engravings and the illustrations. It was the first one with etymologically ordered definitions that were grouped according to the history of the word. And it was the first dictionary written by a staff, a team of scholars, just the way we do it today. And that team included this man, William Minor. He's the man who became a medical doctor and an army surgeon in the Civil War and then moved to England and then committed a murder and was deemed insane. And rather than executed, the British put him in an insane asylum. He became the madman in the book called The Professor and the Madman, which is the story of the origin of the Oxford English Dictionary. So we see that this man from the Merriam company later had a connection to the Oxford Dictionary. Now, in 1864, that dictionary that we just talked about, the great new first revision of Webster's dictionary, was so successful that it actually sold well in England. Which is a little bit ironic because Webster's original dictionary was written essentially to separate from England. But there was no great success